Greg, thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So obviously the events that unfolded today, the tragic death of the ex-Navy diver, a reminder of just how dangerous the situation is. Can you give us any insight into what might have happened down there with this diver?
Yeah, it's really hard to speculate. They give very limited information on the media reports and so forth. But it just shows that diving in this environment is quite dangerous for sure. We don't know really the diver's experience level in this environment, and the reality is even experienced cave divers often haven't had experience in this environment just because of the conditions with the zero visibility and currents and those types of things.
Can you go into more detail about those factors, sort of paint us a picture of what diving through this cave system might be like?
Well, I think the conditions have improved quite a bit over the last few days as they've been pumping out water and they haven't had as much rain. But I think the original conditions were when the rainfall was going on, that there's a lot of heavy currents in the waters. The rainwater itself, will pick up a lot of debris and silt and so forth. So I understand that it's very much zero visibility, which literally means that you can't see even your hand in front of you. You're often like going everything by feel. And so cave divers, what they would do is they would use guidelines inside the cave system. So they would literally use those for tactile references as they're moving through different systems and so forth.
Obviously, preparing anyone to dive in these conditions would be difficult, but inexperienced boys is a whole other challenge. Are there any sort of special pieces of equipment that might help?
Well, I've heard that they'd be looking at full face masks, which makes sense to what I would think. The full face mask covers the whole face like this, whereas normal dive gear, we often just have a regulator and a mask that are separated. For somebody that's never tried diving before, a full face mask would make it feel a little bit more natural. It also makes it more challenging for them to actually remove any of the equipment. So if they do feel uncomfortable, sometimes that's a reaction that people might have. So that would be something that they would look at. The main thing that if they do have to do this is they just need to somehow get the children and the coach to be as calm and comfortable as possible, and so that way the rescue divers can really take control over all the maneuvers that need to be done. The other factor though, and this again is not really clear in the reports, is seems like there's sections where there's where they can walk, there's sections where they can float, and then there's underwater sections. And then obviously the underwater sections is where they'll need the scuba diving equipment for. But they don't really say how long those sections are. So how many cylinders they need to get them from one dry part to another part isn't clear. So if they need multiple cylinders and so forth, and those all add extra logistics and complications, with how to make sure that if somebody's running out of one cylinder of scuba, how they would change to a different one while they're wearing a full face mask. Really not even, I think, looking at training them how to dive is more so getting comfortable with the equipment, and then maybe they would teach them some communication, because they'd have to communicate either through hand signals, but if it's zero visibility, they don't even have that as an option. So it might be what we call tactile signals, where you have to use squeezes and different things. Like sometimes we would use like 2 squeezes as an okay sign, and then 2 squeezes back would mean that I am okay. Multiple squeezes means it might be a problem, and those types of things.
There are a couple of sort of ticking time bombs, so to speak. We know that monsoon season is ramping up, and we might see water levels rise. And we know that we're running out of oxygen. This isn't the only possibility, and we haven't heard yet whether the dive will happen or when it'll happen. But given everything that we know, do you think this is one of the best solutions we have?
Well, again, it's really hard to know without all the details, but like you say, I think the last I heard that they were reporting that the oxygen levels are down to 15% inside the chamber that the team is located in. Normal oxygen levels in air is 21%. 15 to 16% is about as low as we can get while remaining conscious. So it is still a survivable level of oxygen, but if it continues to deplete, then they certainly can get into a big problem with that. There's one issue too that I haven't really seen reported, but is kind of coincides with the lack of oxygen, is an increase of carbon dioxide, which is when we're breathing, we bring in oxygen, but we actually produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct. And so as the CO2 levels rise, that can also cause some hazards for them as well. So the breathing environment certainly is one of the imminent factors. So it's such a complicated situation, and I just feel for everybody that's involved, because I imagine the level of ecstatic, enthusiasm when they found the team. But now there's this complication of how do we rescue them and get them out.
Yeah, and the world is watching this one closely. So thank you very much for your insight, Greg.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.